Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. For those that have been following me along and learning about, mounts and stuff like that, this is the next part of that series. So we're talking about Mercury. We're gonna talk about the moon mount, which is right here on the outside of the palm, and right here, which is like mine looks like it's almost one big mount here, but this is also your upper Mars. So anyway, and then we're going to talk about Mars too, which goes all the way across the middle of the palm. You can see my palms are a little dry, so when we get into chiromancy, you're definitely going to want to keep your hands lotioned up so you can see those fine lines better. But yes, okay, so let's get into it. Now, I hope that this is just a reminder. Like, if you have identified your big three, then the big three in your hand are going to be what primarily dominates your personality. So it's just something to keep in mind. That's why I suggest taking notes. And that way, once you've established your big three, and you're going to want to look at your left and your right hand together. And remember that your mounts can also change. So major lines are, we've talked about those. That's your heart, your head, your fate line, and your lifeline. Those don't change. Little lines will appear on them and little markings will appear on them, but they don't change. Everything else in your hand, when it comes to texture, fleshiness, all of that changes. So this is the initial time to take your notes and to get to know yourself. But then I would suggest coming back and re-looking at your hands in about a month, even 2 months, or twice a year. It's crazy when you see the lines in your hands appear, disappear, when you see mounts get bigger, smaller. And it's just proof that your mind is progressive. You know what I mean? It adapts to what you put into your, what you take in, what you consume, and what you put out. So without further ado, here are the mounts I just talked about. Hi, what you're looking at here is the mount of Mercury underneath the pinky finger. And there is so much to discuss about Mercury, especially when we get into all the lines and stuff. But Mercury is associated with, in my opinion, Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus. And it is all about commerce and business and money. So you're going to find a lot of things on this mount pertaining to that. But if we're just talking about the mount, people with a well-balanced mount are they're the thinkers. They're the people that are applying the knowledge that they have. They have a lot of potential in business and making money, possibly very interested in psychology, which myself I am, and that's my Mercury, so it is pretty well balanced to the rest of my hand. I believe it's one of my big three. They can be very disciplined, great organizers. But on the other side of that, besides being crafty and all of that, if we look at the shadow side of everything that you can be good at, they can also be very shrewd. They can make good liars because they think about everything. Now, over an oversized Mercury mount adds kind of like confusion to our thought process, but it exaggerates everything that I just discussed. So someone with a extremely large Mercury mount in their hand, that might be their first instinct, is to lie. It is because they're a little bit confused, and so when a person is confused, they go into that safe mode and they want to protect themselves. And so all those shadow aspects of a healthy Mercury might be at the forefront there. Now, a person that has an underdeveloped Mercury is going to have that same confusion, but they are not going to be as clever or manipulative. So look for a firm Mercury, because these are the people that are willing to go above and beyond to obtain knowledge. So these are the people that are the very well organized, hardworking people that willing to apply themselves. Whereas if it's squishy, these people might be more still very clever, but in a nonchalant way. They might be a little bit more relaxed when it comes to applying themselves. So they might come by the knowledge easily, but then applying themselves in that area, they might be less motivated to do so. So that's it. That's Mercury, and I can't wait to get into the chiromancy with you. You know, all the lines, because there's a lot of information there. So be patient, and once we get through these, I'll get through all the mounts. We will get into the lines. Hi, what you're looking at here are the mounts of Mars. We have inner and outer, and then in the center is the plane of Mars. Inner Mars, which I like to call the warrior, is also called lower Mars and negative Mars, because not always is the warrior coming out appropriately, if you know what I mean. Mars is where we find our instinctual self. It's the part of us that comes out when we feel threatened or unsafe. It is fright or flight. When we are in that state, you're going to find how you react, or a reflection of who you truly are in Mars. So again, inner Mars for me is where you find the warrior. It is the ability, when you see a well-balanced Mars, to be able to protect yourself. It can either show someone who is enthusiastic or aggressive. Now, when it is very developed, it could also show somebody that is quick-tempered or maybe overindulgent, possibly egotistical and argumentative. It is kind of like always being in defense mode. But when you look at the balance of outer Mars, and if they are about the same size, that's what you want to see, then outer Mars kind of balances inner Mars. Outer Mars is also called upper Mars or positive Mars. So where inner can be negative and have lower aspects, outer is positive and has the upper aspects or the higher aspects of your personality. So you want to see a well-balanced or nice developed outer Mars to kind of subdue the warrior. It gives you time to be proactive instead of reactive. It is your willpower and the ability to rein in the warrior. So the upper mount does reflect our temperament, but an overly developed mount denotes someone who could be stubborn or defiant. And that's not somebody you want to enter into a give and take situation. So if the mount is absent or flat, this could be somebody that does not know how to express themselves. You know, they're not going to come out with their true feelings because they're afraid. They will avoid confrontation, and they might have a lot of anxiety. Now, a person that has a great balance and is normally elevated, these are the people that are very strong and courageous, and I would say mentally very healthy outlook, healthy ability to be proactive. Then we get into the plane of Mars. I like to think of the plane of Mars as the place where we strategize. Now, some say that if it's flat, which, you know, you want to see a flat one, that is good, that's healthy. That shows a person that is able to center themselves. It doesn't mean that they won't have temper tantrums, but they are able to think about their next move. Why I like to call it strategizing, because if it is overly elevated or more elevated, then these are the people that might seek revenge, because they might be a little bit vindictive. They like to sit and think about their next move, but also, again, that's more so if you see an elevated plane of Mars and then say inner and outer are not well balanced, because that leads to struggles in how you react to things. So that is the plane of Mars. Having a flat or a dip is good. That shows patience. It so shows the ability to stay calm in those type of situations. So the more elevated, it is going to show more impatience, and especially if inner Mars or the warrior is a little bit more elevated or larger, then this is a person that might come right at you and they don't know how to rein it in. And they might not let things go, if you know what I mean. So that is Mars. Take a look at your Mars. And we all know that Mars is a warrior in general. But this also speaks to your instinctual self. So, hi. What you're looking at here is the moon mount in your palm. It has also been called the Mount of Luna, and it symbolizes our creativity, our intuition, and our imagination. Where Apollo is also where we found creativity. This is our inner creativity. So, people with a nice predominant mount of Luna actually have a very feminine energy that they possess. It's, a nice feminine energy. And they could have a great imagination. So they could be lovers of poetry, literature. They might even like to travel, but they're also in tune with nature. Now, an overdeveloped moon mount might show somebody that has an excessive amount of imagination, which means they could have a little trouble with, seeing the difference between what's real in their life and what is imagination. So they might struggle there. And a person that has an underdeveloped moon mount actually does not mean that they don't have these qualities, as much as it just means they're not in touch with their emotions as much as they are their physical self, which means they could be more sensual. They might be more in touch with their physical self, so they could be considered more sensual. So when it's well balanced to the rest of the hand, it does show creativity, and it shows a balance between reality and imagination. Now, notice that this moon mount almost looks like it's one big mount on my hand, because upper Mars, which I talked about in a previous video, looks like it's all one mount. So you can see that upper Mars and my Mount of Luna are pretty much about the same size. But at the bottom, there is almost like it's pronounced above my wrist. And yes, you can see I'm kind of holding my hand that way, but you want to see that. If you can see a major distinct line between where the Mount of Luna ends and right above your wrist, this actually shows that you have plenty of intuition and the ability to look beyond what's practical. So you know things before they're going to happen. And it also makes you intuitively protective. So with a well-developed mount of the moon, you might find your writers, your speakers, your painters, composers. And on the other hand, a poorly developed Mount of Luna the person might be inclined to be a loner. They are better at keeping to themselves. So as we move through these, and we have already looked at the previous mounts, knowing that each mount is just one part of the picture, then we have to take all these things into consideration, like a person with a underdeveloped moon mount but with a large Mars mount. They're going to be obviously more aggressive and not as kind, whereas they might have a large inner Mars and have a large moon mount, and these people are still going to be extremely kind-hearted, but they might be more of an activist. They might want to, again, because I said, this is where we protect others. They're going to feel very passionate about protecting others and passionate about the things that they believe in. So you're also going to find your romantics with a nice developed moon mount. And there you go. That's the moon. Thank you again for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.